All right, so you guys wanted a deep dive on Bulgaria and Russia, and boy, are we going to give it to you. We're cracking open this interview, right, with this Bulgarian journalist, Ivo Indzhev.
Ivo Indzhev, yeah.
And he is calling it, like he sees it, distorted history, no holds barred. And let me tell you, some of this stuff, I was like, wait, what?
Well, it really challenges the kind of common narrative, right? The whole brotherly bond between Bulgaria and Russia.
Okay, so everybody listening has probably heard that phrase before, brotherly bond, Slavic brothers, all that. But Indzhev is basically like, hold my drink, because he goes through centuries of history here.
Yeah.
And let's just say, somebody's been messing with the Wikipedia page.
It's definitely a much more, how shall we say, nuanced relationship than a lot of folks might realize at first glance.
Nuanced is one word for it. I mean, we're talking invasions, we're talking betrayal, we're talking some serious geopolitical maneuvering.
Oh, absolutely.
Where do we even start with this?
Well, I think one of the first things that struck me when I was reading through this interview transcript was Indzhev talking about Sviatoslav.
Oh, yes, Sviatoslav.
Now, for folks who might not have their Bulgarian history memorized, don't worry. I had to brush up a bit myself. This was a Russian prince back in the day who basically went on a bit of a rampage through Bulgarian territory. Not exactly what you'd call brotherly love.
No, not exactly the welcome wagon.
And then, you fast forward a few centuries and you've got Ivan the Terrible.
Okay. Living up to the name.
Oh, yeah. He was earning that title. And one of the things he does is he completely obliterates Volga Bulgaria.
Volga Bulgaria. That rings a bell vaguely, but help us out here.
So Volga Bulgaria, this was a really interesting civilization. Flourishing trade network, unique architecture. I mean, they were arguably more advanced than Muscovy was at the time.
Okay, so not some backwater, but like a real thriving civilization.
Absolutely. And Ivan the Terrible just wipes it off the map.
And the point being?
The point being, this wasn't just some border skirmish, right? This was the destruction of an entire culture, an entire people. And what's even more interesting, millions of people still identify as Volga Bulgarians today, primarily in Tatarstan.
Wow, I had no idea. It's like erasing a whole chapter from the history books.
Yeah.
And then you've got these living, breathing descendants saying, hey, we're still here, remember us.
Right. And Indzhev makes a really interesting point about this. He's like, why isn't Bulgaria doing more to connect with these Bulgarian communities? I mean, talk about a missed opportunity.
Seriously. Like, you'd think there'd be this natural bridge, this shared heritage. But it seems like that whole brotherly bond narrative with Russia kind of gets in the way.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how much of this narrative that we've been sold, how much of it is true history, and how much of it is, well, let's just say, convenient politics?
Oh, for sure. And speaking of convenient politics, can we talk about the Greek project for a minute? Because that's where things start to get really wild.
Okay, so the Greek project. Basically, for centuries, Russia had this ambition to establish a dominant Greek presence in the Balkans.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, but give us the details here.
Right, so think about it. Aligning with the Orthodox Church, promoting Greek culture, all with the goal of essentially creating a Russian-backed Greek sphere of influence.
And meanwhile, their Slavic brothers in Bulgaria are, getting left out in the cold?
Pretty much.
Not very brotherly, if you ask me.
Not exactly. And it had huge consequences for Bulgaria. They're struggling under Ottoman rule for centuries, desperately needing support, and their supposed allies over there playing chess with the Greeks. It makes you really rethink that whole narrative of Bulgaria's eventual liberation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like, were they really fighting for Bulgarian liberation, or are they just shuffling the geopolitical deck chairs?
Exactly. And this is where Indzhev gets really passionate. He's like, Bulgaria shouldn't even be celebrating its liberation as its national holiday. They should be celebrating the April Uprising.
The April Uprising. Refresh our memories.
This was a massive Bulgarian uprising against the Ottomans back in 1876, ultimately crushed. But it showed their spirit, their determination to be free.
Right, so it was about their own agency, their own fight for independence.
Exactly. And Indzhev's point is that's the real victory, not some outside power coming in and saying, okay, you're free now.
It's like the difference between being handed your freedom and seizing it for yourself.
Exactly.
Powerful stuff. Okay, but it doesn't stop there. Right? I mean, we've got the Treaty of San Stefano coming up, and from what I've heard, that's when the brotherly bond really starts to unravel.
Oh, yeah, buckle up, because that's when things get really shady.
Shady how? Give us the dirt.
Well, on the surface, it looks like this big win for Bulgaria, right? Russia swoops in after the Russo-Turkish War, Treaty of San Stefano gets signed, Bulgaria's on the map again, bigger borders than ever before.
Okay, so far so good, right?
Not so fast, because what Indzhev uncovers is, behind the scenes, Russia had already made all these secret agreements with the other European powers.
Wait, hold up. So they're putting on this big show of liberating Bulgaria, but they'd already decided how much of Bulgaria they were going to let exist.
Pretty much, and this is all documented. Indzhev points to the memoirs of Ignatiev, this Russian diplomat, the guy who was actually negotiating the treaty.
And what'd he say? Spill the tea.
He basically admits that the whole thing was a sham, that they never intended to let Bulgaria become this big, powerful Slavic nation.
Man, talk about a slap in the face. Bulgaria gets betrayed by their so-called protector before the ink's even dry on the treaty.
Exactly. And you know what's even more frustrating? Indzhev talks about how some Bulgarian academics try to downplay all of this.
Seriously, they're trying to sweep this under the rug.
It happens. It can be really uncomfortable to challenge these national myths, even when the evidence is staring you right in the face.
Yeah, but if you don't acknowledge the past, you're doomed to repeat it, right? And speaking of repeating the past, can we talk about Tsar Alexander III? Because this guy takes the cake when it comes to historical revisionism.
Oh, yeah, Alexander III. He's a complicated figure.
Complicated how?
Well, on the one hand, he was known as the Tsar peacemaker. He avoided any major wars during his reign. But when it came to Bulgaria, let's just say he had a bit of a temper.
Okay, I'm sensing some tension here. What happened?
Well, remember how Bulgaria unified? Became one whole kingdom instead of two halves?
Yeah, seemed like a good thing.
Well, Alexander III did not see it that way. He was furious. He saw it as a direct challenge to Russian interests in the Balkans.
And I'm guessing he didn't just send a strongly worded letter.
No, he went full-on diplomatic freeze-out, cut off all ties with Bulgaria.
Are you serious? After all that, after claiming to be their protector, they just iced them out completely.
Yep, that's how little he cared about their brotherly bond. Alexander III had his eyes on the Black Sea, and he saw an independent Bulgaria as a threat.
This whole situation just screams irony,
Yeah.
Bulgaria is trying to find their own way, be truly independent, and their supposed ally turns on them. It's like they escaped one empire only to run straight into the arms of another.
And what Indzhev points out is that this pattern doesn't end with the Tsars. The Soviets, they come in and they basically pick up right where the Tsarist regime left off.
Oh, great. More of the same, huh?
But worse, in a way. Indzhev draws this really stark contrast between how the West approached liberation after World War II and how the Soviets approached it.
Okay, lay it out for us. What was the difference?
So the West, they're all about free elections, a free press, helping these countries rebuild along democratic lines. And the Soviets, they roll in with the tanks and the propaganda machine.
So much for liberation.
Exactly. It was liberation on Soviet terms. And one of the key tools in their arsenal was the systematic rewriting of history.
Give us an example, because that sounds pretty insidious.
Well, Indzhev tells this story about how Bulgarian politicians, high-ranking officials, would go around claiming that Bulgaria actually declared war on the USSR during World War II.
Wait, what? That's insane.
It is, but that's how powerful this propaganda was. They literally flipped the script, made Bulgaria out to be the aggressor, when in reality, they were occupied-controlled.
It's like they straight up rewrote reality, and most people just accepted it.
That was the goal, right? Control the narrative, control the people.
Man, this whole deep dive has been eye-opening. Disturbing, but eye-opening.
It really makes you question everything you thought you knew. About Bulgarian history, about Russian history, about the stories we tell ourselves about the past.
And about those academics Indzhev talked about, the ones who seem to be perfectly fine with glossing over all of this. It makes you wonder how much of that is going on even today.
It's a natural human instinct, right? To cling to what's familiar, even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, but at what point does it become willful ignorance? At what point do you have to look in the mirror and say, am I part of the problem here?
It's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. But I think the first step is acknowledging that there's a problem to begin with.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about Bulgaria, but Indzhev's point here is much bigger than that.
Absolutely. This is about how we understand history, period, and especially the history of powerful nations.
Because if this is how Russia treated Bulgaria, a country that was supposed to be their closest ally, What does that tell us about their actions in other parts of the world?
Exactly. And throughout history, we have to be willing to ask those uncomfortable questions. We have to be willing to look at the whole picture, even the parts that don't fit the official narrative.
Because otherwise, we're just letting ourselves be manipulated.
Exactly. And that's what Indzhev is fighting against. This idea that history is fixed, that it's something we just have to accept. He's saying, no, question everything. Dig deeper. Find the truth.
And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface here, but it's a start, right?
Definitely. Every journey starts with a single step.
All right, folks, we've thrown a lot of information at you today. The show notes have got links, articles, all that good stuff. If you want to do your own deep dive, keep asking the tough questions, keep searching for the truth, and as always, happy diving.